I don't have anything in particular. I mean, it's all the usual. Slappy Joe fell off the bike, those kind of silly things. Nothing that important, right?
Yes, well, that's because we, as usual, live in a fog,
That's right.
a fog of an invisible conflict, and none of us are told the truth about just about anything.
Correct. Correct. It's still somewhat crazy. Well, it's for the most part still crazy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think CDC is definitely pushing it to 6 months old now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And what we
Yeah.
have, what we have in general is the a disconnect between what we are told
Right.
and what we know.
Right.
And the problem always, as usual, is that we cannot get direct information because we've given our the power to
That's
inform
right.
us to some middleman or middlewoman, middle
That's
person
right.
who we trust supposedly to tell us what's going on. Now, there's
Yeah.
nothing more ludicrous. There's nothing more
Yeah.
ridiculous than someone who says, "Oh, but I saw it on CNN. Therefore, that person with the cell phone who was there at that
Mm-hmm.
event must
Mm-hmm.
be confused." In other words, we're discounting the direct reporting evidence of people on the ground with their cell phones showing us what happened, and
Right.
instead, and over the internet, social media, and instead
Right.
we're buying the analysis or the spin or the
Mm-hmm.
outright lies and distortions of some paid agent of a special
Sure.
interest group,
That's right.
and that we somehow think that that's a more veracious, a more accurate source of information,
Correct.
which is complete nonsense. And I learned that a long time ago when I was studying history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For example, if you read in a history book
Yeah.
about World War II,
Right.
you are told a lot of spin, a lot of things that are just designed for your consumption and to be in your mind. And why do you not consult the audio biography
Mm-hmm.
or the written books? Although the written books are not as reliable because they can be altered by the editors or the printers or censored by somebody. The best are the actual experiences of those involved,
Right. Right.
and they'll make a recording for their family or for an intrepid reporter explaining just what it was like at this particular battle or at this particular meeting with some general
Mm-hmm.
or with Hitler even, or Eisenhower or whatever, and they'll tell you exactly what happened. And you know what? It's a lot different than what you read in the books.
Indeed.
Now, why is
Indeed.
that? Why is that? It's because it's a difference between the direct truth and the controlled truth. Now, aren't you getting tired? Aren't we all getting tired of the controlled truth? And a good example is where over the weekend, our wonderful government decided that masks and vax passes were no longer required to enter the parliament buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that all of a sudden? Is there any connection between that and the fact that one of the MPs, a lady from the Prairie Provinces, I think she's from Regina, refuses to announce her vaccination status and was going to march into the Parliament buildings on Monday morning, which is today, and
Mm-hmm.
defy them to arrest her, which would have been totally unconstitutional because she's an MP and she has constitutional rights.
Indeed.
Okay. So the government then decides to cancel those things because, of course, they have nothing to do with COVID. They have nothing to do with an endemic. They have to do with muzzling democracy.
Yes.
That's what the restrictions on the parliament and that's restrictions on MPs and that's what the whole so-called hybrid parliamentary session this year was all about. Limit and muzzle democracy. Those people can't see what's really going on. People feel powerless or they feel afraid to interact and talk with each other about the events that are being orchestrated behind their back.
Yep.
To keep them from their from their God-given liberties. And that's the situation that we live in at the moment. And the nonsense that comes out of the mouths of these masters of ours, dully unelected, by the way, is things like, well, it was the parliamentary office of blah, blah, blah that instituted these vax mandate requirements for Parliament, not us, not the Liberals. And then, of course, but the Liberal Party are the ones who canceled it.
That's right.
The Liberal leaders are the one that canceled it and gave their orders, of course, to the parliamentary office, because that's the way the chain of command works. Anyway, we're not going to get into the complexities of the parliamentary, undemocratic system of government that we live in here in Canada. But the point is, for every action, there's an equal and opposite propaganda story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So whatever you see is happening, there's somebody coming out with an explanation which is a complete opposite of what the truth is. What the true reasons are. And it goes on and on and on. And we feel powerless, don't we? Well, no, I don't think so. I think that we have the technology and we have the wherewithal to go out into the world with our fabulous little iPhones and pocket recording devices. And when you see something happening, make a video, comment on it. Put it on your channel, somebody else's channel, put it on TikTok. Use social media, which was designed by them to keep track of us. Now we can use social media as a weapon to inform each other in spite of them. And that's what we have to start doing.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, indeed.
For example, Bill Gates came to town here in Vancouver last month, or 2 months ago, I believe it was, and gave a TED Talk. Well, there was a massive protest in front of the building where he was going to talk, and the crowds were chanting things like "Down with Bill Gates," etc., etc., and there were literally thousands of people doing that.
That's right.
Well, not a single second of that was in any of the mainstream media. However, there was a huge focus on 12 people blocking a bridge because they want to preserve first-growth forest trees. So 12 people blocking a bridge is far more important than Bill Gates, one of the most powerful people in the world, totally invested in pharmaceuticals. And for him to be heckled, it doesn't deserve a word of print. Well, why? Why is that? I thought the media was in the public interest. No, it's not. It's in somebody else's interest, corporate or otherwise.
Yes, and they don't bite the hands that feed them.
Exactly, and that's why the CBC received a $300 million COVID emergency loan from the federal government about 2 years ago. In order to help inform the public of the horrible dangers that we're in, and encourage us all to get assassinated, and the little morbid assassination that goes in your arm.
That's right.
So anyway,
chemical treatment.
Yeah. So we're all supposed to get that, and the CBC has $300 million to help tell us about it. Well, I thought their job was to tell us about things for free, because they're a nonprofit crown corporation all the time. So what do they need a $300 million for? Well, it's called "do as we say" money. We'll pay you, and it's corruption, and that's what we live in now. We live in a world of corruption, where one human is going to sell out the freedoms, the dignities, and perhaps even the very life and safety of another human being for an economic advantage. Now, would you do that to your neighbor?
No.
Would you let their house burn down if you were offered a certain amount of money and guaranteed safety for yourself? Would you do that? Would most people do that? No, they wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to psychologically watch your neighbor and his family burn to death, hearing their screams, knowing that you're safe just because you've been paid. Most people wouldn't be able to do that, even for $1 million. However, when there's a middleman. When there's
Mhm.
somebody in between, then there's a buffer. And just like in the Godfather movies, the boss has always got a lot of buffers between him
Mhm.
and the crimes that he's committed. The
Mhm.
murders,
Mhm.
the beatings, the financial crimes. And that's the world we live in today. We live in a world of paid off buffers who have sold us down the river, and we have to take back our power.
Yes. We should start by proactively committing ourselves and be community focused, because that's how we can
Absolutely.
make all the necessary corrections and move onwards from there onwards. Because
Yep.
really, people, the structured societies that we all live in nowadays
Mm-hmm.
has been designed with a very specific agenda, with a very specific idea in mind, meaning that
Yes.
first off, there's always the NIMBYism, not in my backyard mentality.
Right.
Secondly, a lot of people fallen into the idea of, hey, instead of me physically get myself out there and get involved into some community related volunteering work, charity work, or something like that,
Uh-huh.
oh, all I have to do is, take out my checkbook, cut a $10 check, and send it off to so and so charity, and they will do the work for me.
Well, there you
Just
go. And that
because when I saw that crying African starving boy on TV sets
yep.
from that charity organization, yeah, people are falling into those kind of traps. I mean, come to think of it, a lot of these so-called NGOs or not-for-profit organizations legally registered in Canada, I bet you only a few cents per every dollars goes into the actual costs, whereas
10% or less.
way less. Okay, whereas the majority of them goes into so-called administrative fees and administrative settings,
I've heard
such
for
as paying the
some.
rent, paying the staffs, paying this, paying that, hiring consultants to do work and so on, to draft reports, to come up with some TV commercial ideas to further lure us into the trap and so on. I mean,
It's a form of vampirism,
it
except
is.
instead of just sucking your money, they're also sucking your heart. They're
That's right.
sucking your empathy, your
Mm,
community willingness to help others. They're sucking
mm,
that. The
mm,
energy in that is being dissipated, so you no longer have any will or power left to help your own neighborhood and help your neighbor. Because you think, oh, I did my part. I sent $10 to Africa. Well, no, you didn't. You trusted somebody who said that that would happen, but
that's
it
right.
demonstrably is not happening. And that
Mhm.
then you're not only are you fooling yourself, but you're letting down and betraying the community in which you live. And I'll give you some practical examples.
Sure.
Just about everybody these days lives in a community with a business that closed, that 2.5 years ago was thriving, and that
Uh-huh.
business is, in the majority of cases, is a small ma and pa family owned business of some sort.
That's right.
It's not a
That's
big
right.
box retailer. It's not a chain organization. It's just you and me, small business trying to make ends meet that's closed. Another
Mm,
thing that just about everybody sees on the streets of their neighborhood is somebody begging for coins,
mhm,
asking for a handout. Now,
mhm.
why don't we take our wonderful electronic magical devices and go and find out the owner of that store, that business, and ring them up and ask them if they'd like to give an interview. Explain
Indeed.
just exactly what happened. How did they lose their business?
Yep.
What government inspectors came and closed them down? How did they lose their license? What kind of red tape was used against them, and why did they have to close during lockdowns? And how do they feel about it? And that's the first
Yeah,
step. The second step is to find the person on the street and go and talk to them.
that's right.
Give them $10 for an interview and ask the
Mm-hmm.
man or woman or child in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
how did this
Mm-hmm.
happen to you?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about every day? Do you like this life? How has it affected your family?
Mm-hmm.
Are you addicted? Do you want to be addicted? What do you see and hear
Mm-hmm.
about your situation? What do you know
Mm-hmm.
about gangs? What do you know about complicity of government and police? Let's hear your
That's right.
story. Well, you're not going to hear your story anything like what I've just mentioned anywhere in the mainstream media. Why is that? Those are problems in
Because
front of our face.
that's right. Well, the mainstream media is part of the propaganda these days more so than ever. And because of that, they just want to keep on painting a different picture and with an illusion and trying hard to constantly keep us entrapped within this illusion.
I'm extremely disappointed at my fellow citizens for not interviewing any street people and putting their story
Nope.
on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube. Why is that? How come we don't see those stories? All we see is videos from a distance decrying their decrepitude and showing a bunch of people lying on on the sidewalk, sleeping in a blanket. Yet nobody goes and talks to them. Nobody records their story. Why not? All you have to do is give them a donation or not, and ask them for their permission to be interviewed. And if they say no, fine. And the next one says yes. And if they say yes, you're legally allowed to do anything you like with the interview and ask any questions they like. And they have free will, and they can answer or not answer. So there's no legal restriction whatsoever. So
Mm-hmm.
why is that not being done? And I'm really disappointed in the so-called wake or woken community. All they do is talk about and complain about government and the media, like I'm doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and why we're not fixing the problem, and yet the problem's right in front of you, and you're not even investigating it. You're not even learning from the guy lying on the street in front of your house. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the small businessmen that closed. Let's find out. Let's publicize the damage that's being done by these so-called morbid vacation shots,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're destroying the economies and the lives of people. Let's hear some stories about how children were affected by having to wear a mask all day in school. Have you seen any interviews on Facebook or TikTok from a 12-year-old who had to wear a mask all day and how they feel about it?
Negative so far.
How about a 16-year-old? They're legally allowed, without their parents' permission, to say anything to you they want. They're an adult,
Mm-hmm.
legally.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can muzzle
Mm-hmm.
them. How come? How come? How come? This is what we have to do. This is what has to be done. And this, otherwise, society as we know it is what we deserve. If we're not going to stand up and do something, and I'm talking hypothetically, like standing up and overthrowing the oppressor and whatever like that. No, I'm talking about directly doing something in your neighborhood, which you can easily do today. But
Yep.
we're not doing that. We're sitting back. We're just waiting for someone to save us. Where your salvation is right around the corner, and you're ignoring it. Because that's
Yep.
us, that's society. And if we start there, it'll snowball into such a wave of consternation that we will eventually have to deal with these problems, because that is the result. What you see, the human destruction and misery on your street corner, is the result of our government's policies.
That is indeed correct. Very well said.